Well, welcome everybody. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button.
I remember in middle school when you felt self-conscious if you were the last one to go through puberty. That really went topsy-turvy, didn't it?
Sometimes the house it's too much explaining yourself and it's too apologetic.
Be sure to hit the notifications bell.
I actually do believe Israel won't just bomb countless civilians.
Be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to put this up on your Facebook.
You have to be kind to people. Being kind is the guys in this mess in the first place.
You can put this up on your Reddit.
Chile is a country.
Be sure to cut and paste, a link to this to go into your favorite Facebook chat group.
It's good to see so many normal people in here.
Now, spanking isn't just my deep, dark personal secret. It's America's deep, dark secret.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere.
Put this on WhatsApp. Put this on Telegram. Put this on your favorite messenger app.
Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Hey Adam, how you getting on? Good to see you back. We have a whole bunch of new bullshit, and a few new bullshit suppliers even, to check out this week. There's some people who just showed up in my recommendations, and I realized I had completely neglected them, but they have earned a spot, I think. We've got a whole bunch of stuff about the... Okay, so here's a rundown. Let's see, we've got Kamala Harris's full horrible DNC speech. We've got the utterly pathetically groveling speech that was still too dignified for the Democrats to allow a Palestinian to give it at the convention. We've got Quillette, the white nationalist turf website. They have a YouTube channel apparently, and they have a piece called "The German Left's Jewish Dilemma." And I mean, it's Quillette. They love a JQ. So that'll be interesting. We've got the Young Turfs reacting to the Harris DNC speech. We've got Ro Khanna explains what progressives could realistically expect from Democrats. So that'll be a wow, 15 minutes and 30 seconds to say nothing. Wow, I mean, that's a lot of words to you could just say nothing and then move on. Bernie Sanders' DNC speech with the Young Turfs reacting. We've got some Pim Tool. Kamala roasted over price control plan. Trump calls it communist. Yeah, if only. If fucking only. Then we've got Graham Linehan, a psychotherapist and a lawyer, unpick trans ideology. The psychotherapist is a far-right conversion therapy ghoul. And the lawyer, I seem to remember having some kind of fash ties. I forget exactly what her deal was. There's the gender-critical divide and the search for common grounds. It's a turf fight. Okay, then Vush, a regular on the channel. Do not hate yourself. When, I guess, the idea is that Vush is a much more obvious target for one's hatred. But then, here's somebody else new. We've got Twat Mulch. I mean, Matt Walsh. Yeah, we've got a couple from him. All of them, I'm sure, are amazing value. Here's what happened when I tried to spread the truth at the DNC. You absolutely cannot miss this exclusive clip from my new film, Am I Racist? Well, see, there's another one we could easily just... that could be very short. Yes, he's racist. The gender-affirming care racket is collapsing in front of our eyes, which is for some reason illustrated with an image of Colin Kaepernick. Then he's got, here are examples of real anti-white racism. Bush approves, I'm sure, and I refuse to patronize women by hiding the truth. Wow. Wow, you know, Twat Mulch. Very truthful guy. Okay, so what's everybody think? Want to do some Twat Mulch? Want to see the Young Turfs reacting to the genocidal horror speech of Kamala? Or the one reacting to Bernie Sanders? You know, got a bunch of Young Turfs shit. Or some Twat Mulch. Or some Vush. Or some Pim Tool. Oh, and also another thing showed up in my recommendations. This is old, but apparently Tim Pool recorded a fucking song called Will of the People. It's actually 3 years old, but it just showed up for me, and so that's something we could. So what's everybody think? Okay, let's see. Well, we got a few from them. We've got the Young Turfs reacting to the Harris speech. We've got the Young Turfs talking to Ro Khanna about what progressives can realistically expect from Democrats, and then reacting to Bernie Sanders. Does everyone want to see the Harris one? Okay, I've never actually watched Walsh. I've only heard about him, really. Okay, let's do it. Young Turfs it is. Hurry up and load, will you?
Thunderous applause. Thunderous.
Yeah. Yeah, very cult-like.
It's kind of nice to have. I like this. This is a tribe getting together.
Yeah, it's lovely though. If you look really carefully, you can see some people trying to raise a banner about the genocide, and you will see some of these totally not fascist people, totally not genocidal people, just normal people, hitting them over the head and doing everything they can to make sure that the dear leader cannot see the sign pointing out that there is genocide. That's just a wonderful atmosphere, isn't it? God.
I think I've seen excitement like this, I mean, in my opinion, since 2008.
Yeah.
Right? It's like similar energy.
I mean, Joe Biden.
Yeah, and let's see, 2008 turned out a real treat.
Did electrify the country, but
thank you all.
This is a different level.
We gotta get to some business.
Wow,
we gotta
guys,
get to some
fucking
business.
fanboys.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please, thank you, please.
An artist by the name of Max Liebermann in Germany, a Jewish artist, remarked in 1933, as he watched the parade for celebrating the ascension of the new chancellor, who the liberals' lesser evil had appointed, said, "I couldn't eat as much as I'd like to puke right now."
Thank you so very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Okay, let's get to business. Let's get to business. All right. So let me start by thanking my most incredible husband, Doug.
How many does she have? Like, list them by relative incredibility, I guess. Who's your most credible husband?
For being an incredible partner to me, an incredible father to Cole and Ella, and happy anniversary, Dougie.
Doug
I love you so very
now known as me.
To our president,
he looks like somebody cloned Charlie Schumer but didn't get it quite right.
Joe Biden.
Wow, you realize how well vetted this crowd has to be to get that kind of reaction out of Joe Biden and Joe Biden's name.
When I think about the path that we have traveled together, Joe, I am filled with gratitude. Your record is extraordinary, as history will show.
That's quite a way to put it. I would agree. Absolutely, hard agree. History will agree that record, fucking extraordinary.
And your character is inspiring, and Doug and I love you and Jill and are forever thankful to you both.
Especially because you know. No, but seriously, that's a nice moment, of course.
Tim Walls.
Oh, is it a nice moment, Jenk? Like, is that a nice moment? Who gives a fuck?
Well, Big Walls Energy Shop,
You are going to
TYT.com.
be an incredible vice president. And to the delegates and everyone who has put your faith in our campaign, your support is humbling.
Especially since nobody actually asked the delegates. The whole thing was just stitched up in advance. You could fit the number of people who had any real say in this in a fucking passenger lift, and there would still be a bit of space left over.
So, America,
Hello,
the path
Phoenix,
that led
yes,
me
indeed.
here in recent weeks was no doubt unexpected. But I'm no stranger to unlikely journeys. So, my mother, our mother, Sean.
Oh, I didn't get the It's been so long since I saw the Manchurian Candidate, the Denzel Washington remake. I did not even get the reference. Oh, yeah.
Kamala Harris had one of her own, and I miss her every day, and especially right now. And I know she's looking down, smiling. I know that. So my mother was 19 when she crossed the world alone, traveling from India to California with an unshakable dream to be the scientist who would cure breast cancer.
That is so
When
much
she
better. That
finished
is so much
school,
better aspiration
she was
than her
supposed to
daughter came
return
up with.
home to a traditional arranged marriage. But as fate would have it,
Like, I mean, so her mother had the aspiration to cure breast cancer. Her father was sort of a, like, diluted Marxist economist, and her thing was she wanted to put poor people in jail if their kids missed school. That's a drop-off.
she met my father, Donald Harris,
Yeah.
a student from Jamaica.
Who doesn't think highly
They,
of her?
they fell in love and got married, and that act of self-determination made my sister Maya and me.
That's what she calls fucking? That act of self-determination? Really?
Growing up, we moved a lot. I will always remember that big Mayflower truck packed with all our belongings, ready to go to Illinois.
It's amazing that people eat this shit up. Like, she's murdered along with her good pal Joe. like 200,000 people who, as she's starving 2 million to death, she has specifically said she has no intention of stopping that. She has outright rejected the idea of stopping the flow of arms to Israel, and as long as that's going on, that's a terrible freeze frame there. That's bad. But yeah, and these people like don't give a shit.
To Wisconsin and wherever our parents' jobs took us. My early memories of our parents together are very joyful ones. A home filled with laughter and music, Aretha, Coltrane, and Miles.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She's got to do some cultural references, because apparently, from what I've seen of some of the coverage of this, all it's been has been just making fucking meme references and cultural references and avoiding talking about anything of substance. And, like, I mean, it's been wild on Twitter, like, on Palestinian Twitter, Palestinians over in Gaza and West Bank and elsewhere watching this shit, and it's like, so this is how you fucking anoint our next fucking murderer? This is, like, what are you, fucking 5 years old?
At the park, my mother would say, "Stay close." But my father would say, as he smiled, "Run, Kamala, run. Don't be afraid. Don't let anything stop you."
Run, Kamala, run. I get it.
Wow, yeah, this is so incisive. I'm so glad that we have fucking Junk and Anna Transphobian to comment on this. They're adding so much substance to it.
From my earliest years, he taught me to be fearless. But the harmony between my parents did not last. When I was in elementary school, they split up. And it was mostly my
they were fighting over who was to blame for her.
Mother who raised us. Before she could finally afford to buy a home, she rented a small apartment in the East Bay. In the Bay, you either live in the hills or the flatlands. We lived in the flats. A beautiful working class neighborhood of firefighters.
Yeah, and how much does it cost to live there now? Like, I mean, did you all see, like, Gavin Newsom is at the fucking convention, to talk about decency and everything like that, but before that, he celebrated the Supreme Court ruling that said you could just kind of criminalize homelessness by personally going and tearing up homeless people's shit. So they've had to make sure he was
nurses,
there.
And construction workers, all who tended their lawns with pride. My mother, she worked long hours, and like many working parents, she leaned on a trusted circle to help raise us. Mrs. Shelton, who ran the daycare below us and became a second mother. Uncle Sherman, Aunt Mary, Uncle Freddie, Auntie Chris, none of them family by blood. And all of them,
this has gone on
family
for like
by love.
This has been 5 minutes.
I like that
She's trying to introduce herself to people who don't.
Well, thank you, Anna. That you think that's what she's doing, introducing herself? You think that's what she was doing? Wow, that's so incisive. I'm glad we have them. Yeah, exactly. Those are the two options, Adam. It's like, either you're a fucking millionaire, or you're living under a bridge owned by one.
How to make gumbo, how to play chess, and sometimes even let us win. Family who loved us, believed in us, and told us we could be anything and do anything.
And you picked
Family's everything.
Cop.
This is the point of the speech where she's saying, I'm you. I'm middle class. I'm just like you.
No, she is. Yeah, that is exactly what she's trying to do. Yes. Of course she isn't. She fucking isn't. Anyone who's on this stage is not. Anyone who's on
community, faith, and the importance of treating others as you would want to be treated.
Wow, well, I guess she got over that last one.
With kindness, respect, and compassion.
This would be a great time to cue the interview. This is like back when she was still AG, or possibly when she was like making her presidential run in 2020. I forget exactly, where she was asked about the whole thing about like throwing parents in prison for their kids missing school, and she literally laughed, thought it was funny, thought it was a great laugh.
My mother was a brilliant, 5-foot-tall, brown woman with an accent. And as the eldest child, I saw...
Like, she nasalizes every fucking vowel. I had not really heard her speak very much. I'd seen, like, little clips. Like, a friend of mine on Facebook had posted something recently. Adam, I'm pretty sure you might have seen it. I think he's a mutual. Like, that he'd managed to avoid hearing her speak for so long, and it's like fucking fingers on chalkboard. And, yeah, like... It's like somebody's mentally is like invisibly holding her nose the whole time.
How the world would sometimes treat her. But my mother never lost her cool. She was tough, courageous, a trailblazer in the fight for women's health. And she taught Maya and me a lesson that Michelle mentioned the other night. She taught us to never complain about injustice, but do something about it. Do something about it.
Well, the thing about doing something about it is that's kind of generic. Like, doing something about it includes making it worse, which is her whole career.
Good.
That was my mother. And she taught us, and she also taught us, and never do anything half-assed. And that is a direct quote.
No, all the stories I've heard about her mother, it's classic immigrant story.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Loves this country, works hard, love
civil rights.
Like, okay, so what you're saying is it's the same bullshit that politicians love to trot out. Like, never mind. I mean, the real question that should be asked is, okay, if the immigration laws the Democrats enacted, that they celebrated and sponsored and really pushed through back in the 1990s, like the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigrant Responsibility Act that set the stage for mass deportations, like the Patriot Act, which created ICE. Would her mother have been allowed into the country as a non-European citizen, as an Indian citizen, without it sounds like a whole lot of money, under the laws that her party wants to make? Things aren't tough enough now.
Movement. My parents had met at a civil rights gathering, and they made.
No, in 2020. She actually, together with like Buttigieg and one other, I forget the other, they were the ones who were in between. Sanders was at the head of the thing, and Biden was bringing up the like last of the serious candidates with actual name recognition, and she was one of the three who dropped out at the same time, apparently at Obama's behest, and then handed all their votes over to Biden so that Biden could become the front runner when he was clearly nowhere near it on his own merit.
Sure that we learned about civil rights leaders, including the lawyers like Thurgood Marshall and Constance Baker Motley. Those who battled in the courtroom to make real the promise of America.
This is a great time to remember that one of her career highlights, well, one of them was going to court for the right to deny trans prisoners health care, and the other was opposing a policy to reduce prison overcrowding in California by letting out people with nonviolent convictions after they'd served half of their sentence, on the grounds that it would deprive the state of a valuable source of slave labor. Like, I mean, it is absolutely wild. She's sitting here talking about, like, this is civil rights as an inspiration. She's been, her entire career has been the anti-civil rights movement.
at a young age, I decided I wanted to do that work. I wanted to be a lawyer. And when it came time to choose the type...
You decided not to do that work.
...of law I would pursue, I reflected on a pivotal moment in my life. You see, when I was in high school, I started to notice something about my best friend, Wanda. She was sad at school. And there were times she didn't want to go home. So one day I asked if everything was all right. And she confided in me that she was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And I immediately told her she had to come stay with us, and she did. This is one of the reasons I became a prostitute.
I kind of wonder, did she ask permission before using this fucking story? See, when we talk about the kind of law that she spent her career practicing, I'm always reminded of a friend of mine, movement lawyer in Britain. We're talking about the differences in ethical regulation of the legal profession between the US and Britain. And he remarked, he goes, you know, if you're a good person and a good lawyer, you tend to go into, like, civil claimant litigation, yeah, you know, representing what in the US is called the plaintiff's side in tort, or criminal defense. If you're a bad person and a good lawyer, then you go to the corporate bar. If you're a bad person and a bad lawyer, on the other hand, you become a prosecutor.
To protect people like Wanda.
Yes.
Because I believe everyone...
Oh, do you like this, Anna? Like... You don't want to push back on that and talk about how many people she locked up for just weed possession. Don't want to talk about that. Don't want to talk about all the, like, parents she put in prison because their kids missed some school, possibly because they had some shit going on at school that they couldn't deal with. Oh, I like that. But then, I mean, she also is a big fan of Kyle Shittentraus. She's not exactly a civil rights icon either, our Anna Transphobian.
Has a right to safety, to dignity, and to justice.
Yes!
Fuck you. Yes, yeah, like, no analysis, like, why do we have you here?
As a prosecutor, when I had a case, I charged it not in the name of the victim, but in the name of the people. For a simple reason.
Kamala Harris for the...
Yeah, well, for the simple reason that that's just how the fucking system works. Yeah, I mean, they call it, you are not, you know, the prosecutor is not a representative of the victim. In the US system, the victim doesn't actually get to be represented in the trial. Other systems actually have. Like the system in which, a criminal complaint was filed against a certain a certain billionaire TERF who lives in a fucking castle in Scotland. There, the reason that Iman Khalif was able to do what she did was because there the victim actually gets to intervene directly in the proceedings. But I mean, this isn't like some choice that she made. You know, if you're a prosecutor, you are acting on behalf of the state, not the victim. So that's like...
In our system of justice, a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us.
Yes.
Really? No pushback on that. No pushback on any of this, right? Remember the Democrats were like pretending to pander to Black Lives Matter at least a little bit 4 years ago, and now she's up here talking about how the criminalization system is based on the principle of an injury to one is an injury to all. It's like just completely uncritically talking about the fucking criminal legal system.
Explain this to console survivors of crime, to remind them no one should be made to fight alone. We are all
Who
in
was the
this
victim
together.
of the 1900 Reed convictions?
And every day, in the courtroom, I stood proudly before a judge and I said 5 words. Kamala Harris for the people.
Yeah, and it was a lie.
The Democrats always emphasize doing this together.
And to be
Trump
clear,
almost never emphasizes.
Yeah, they always emphasize that, and it's always bullshit.
And to be clear,
He says,
my
"I alone
entire
can fix
career, I've only had one client, the people.
So you were representing the people, were you, when you argued that prisons should remain overcrowded in order to have all that slave labor? She was representing the people, you have to understand, when she dropped a bunch of charges against Trump associate and general fraudster Steve Munchkin, and then became the only Democrat he ever bankrolled in a political campaign. They've just decided to pretend that Black Lives Matter didn't happen.
And so, on behalf of the people, on behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with,
on behalf of people who are finding the nasality a little bit trying,
people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth.
What, Italy?
I accept your nomination to be president.
Whose nomination? There was no primary. There was literally no fucking primary. I mean, what? Like, why even pretend? This is an anointment. Like, I mean, okay, we shouldn't be too precious about it, because the fact is these conventions long since ceased to be what they were, like, initially, like, designed as. The whole point of them was at least to have the semblance that there was grassroots participation in party decision-making. And now they've just abandoned that entirely. So you might as well not, like, pretend that any of the people in the audience there, except for maybe, like, 5 or 6 of them, had anything to do with her getting the nomination.
United States of America.
Tim Walz is like the most enthusiastic VP pick of all time.
Yeah. Meanwhile, his son's like, "That's my dad's book." We love that kid, and you know, he serves for
that
attack.
scumbag Gavin Newsom who likes to steal homeless people's shit.
Him today.
I know.
They're the worst.
Disgusting.
And with this election, our nation with this election has a precious, fleeting opportunity to move past the bitterness, cynicism, and divisive battles of the past,
and finally move forward to overthrow the bourgeoisie and begin the path to communism. That's what you were going to say, right?
a chance to chart a new way forward.
A new way forward. They like literally they're not even pretending to have policies. Like, I mean, what's the point? A new way forward. Like, literally, she's been vice president for 4 years already. Having her is literally the opposite, as un-new a way forward as you can get, without, like, weekended Bernieing Joe Biden in there. Like... Like, if you're gonna do hope and change, at least find a shill that people haven't
Not
seen
as
before.
members of any one party or faction, but as Americans.
I like that.
And let me say,
I like that
I know
message.
there are people of various
Of
political
course you
views
fucking
watching
do. You're like
tonight.
the target audience, Anna Transphobian. Of course you love that message.
And I want you to know, I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair.
The rule of law, like, how many fucking court orders is the U.S. in violation of in relation to the genocide in Gaza? Like, I mean, you just stop fucking talking about the rule of law. If the rule of law meant anything, she would be locked up right now. She would not be she'd be in court, but she would not be prosecuting.
Fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
It's only peaceful because there's no actual transfer of power, though.
So far, her speech has been a positive message as opposed to a message of fear.
Well, yes, because it's all been bullshit. Like, I mean, you want to talk a little bit about the fact that we're talking about somebody who's committing genocide right now and has pledged to continue doing so if there's anyone left to genocide in Gaza in January? I mean, yeah, we're just gonna pretend that's not going on, are we? Just gonna pretend that we're in this little fucking bubble at this massive super spreader event.
Message of,
Who unites
trashing the other guy. I mean,
around our
in a
highest
way,
aspirations.
free and fair elections.
A president
You're going
who
after Trump,
leads
but in a good way.
and listens, who is realistic, practical, and has common sense, and always fights for the American people.
Like, she has not yet
From the courthouse to the White House.
Well, it's such a white audience.
That has been my life's work.
From the courthouse to the White House. Where's
As
this
a young courtroom prosecutor in Oakland, California, I stood up for women and children against predators who abuse them. As Attorney General of California, I took on the big banks.
Like, what does that fucking mean? I actually decided to look, that when they say take on like that, they said that about fucking Shapiro too. Last week we were looking at that. I think it was in that Bush stream where he was reacting to fucking we were reacting to some shit about fucking Shapiro, and he was like, he took on the big banks, but no indication of what the fucking result was. It does not mean anything. And she took money from the big banks. I guess that's a way of taking somebody on. You take money from them. You take them on as a client.
Delivered $20 billion for middle-class families who faced foreclosure and helped pass a homeowner bill of rights, one of the first of its kind in the nation. I stood up for veterans and students being scammed by big for-profit colleges.
Well, I mean, except for the ones that, she's talking about this, and again, Steve Mnuchin is just sort of grinning someplace off in the background.
For workers who are being cheated out of their wages, the wages they were due. For seniors facing elder abuse. I fought against the cartels.
I mean, except for the one in the White House right now.
Who traffic in guns and drugs and human beings. Who threaten the security of our border and the safety.
You don't get to talk about fucking human trafficking when you made the argument in court that you needed to keep people in prison as slave labor.
Of our communities. And I will tell you, these fights were not easy. And neither were the elections that put me in those offices. We were underestimated at practically every turn. But we never gave up, because the future is always worth fighting for. And that's the fight we are in right now, a fight for America's future.
So we're going to go something right then where we're going to go into more of the details.
This election is
Yeah, like, come on.
not only the most important of our lives, it is one of the most important.
They've been saying every single fucking election of my life, and I've been through a few now, has been the most important of our lives, and it's been less important than the one that came before it, and more important than the one that came after it. This is easily the least important election of our lives. There is nothing at stake. It is only a question of who is going to bring about fascism. Whether she's going to do it, and she's probably actually in some ways going to be more effective because liberals won't be freaking out when she does shit, or whether it's Trump doing it, with the Democrats helping him out, because the Democrats actually did not really do anything to block him in the legislature last time. They, came up with impeachments on grounds that nobody gave a shit about, and they knew were pointless. But yeah, this is this election
in the life of our nation. In many ways, Donald Trump is an unserious man. But the consequences of putting Donald Trump back in the White House are extremely serious. Consider
that in their in one of their first big post-convention policy statements, they accused Donald Trump of not being belligerent enough towards Iran, rewriting history to leave out the part where he assassinated a top Irani commander.
Only the chaos and calamity when he was in office, but also the gravity of what has happened since he lost the last election.
I refused to watch it live as well. I actually ended up eating dinner in the basement to get away from it, because the whole thing is... I mean, there's something profoundly evil about this fucking pseudo-political event, where it's mostly just, random, just completely insubstantial speeches, and then, random fucking musical acts, and all of it to get people enthusiastic for somebody who is, has earned the title of the Hitler of the Palestinians.
Donald Trump tried to throw away your votes. When he failed...
Yeah, but, they weren't worth anything in the first place.
He sent an armed mob to the United States Capitol, where they assaulted...
An armed mob that would never have gotten anywhere near the Capitol if DC Metro PD hadn't helped him. An armed mob that was made up, to a great extent, of cops, like cop
law enforcement officers. When politicians in his own party...
And I do apologize, Adam. If you had successfully avoided being subjected to this speech, the content is bad, but then you add this voice, it's like just a huge nose that's talking. It's painful to listen to. It would be painful even if the speech didn't suck shit.
Begged him to call off the mob and send help. He did the opposite. He fanned the flames. And now, for an entirely different set of crimes, he was found guilty of fraud by a jury of everyday Americans, and separately found liable for committing sexual abuse.
That's so interesting that she's being very careful there, because there is a libel case against, I think it's George Stephanopoulos right now, because he referred to it as him being found liable for rape, which, he was, except that's just not the statutory language that was used. It's a different offense under New York law. But, so, she's,
Consider what he intends to do if we give him power again. Consider his explicit intent to set free violent extremists who assaulted those law enforcement officers at the Capitol.
I mean, they're going to be set free pretty soon. Most of them got off quite easy, and a lot of them didn't go to jail at all. And again, I mean, you talk about violent extremists, the cops are that. Well, they're violent.
His explicit intent to jail journalists, political opponents, and anyone he sees as the enemy.
Motherfucker, Joe Biden campaigned on the idea of rounding up and incarcerating anarchists for the past several years until a deal was finally reached. Joe Biden, following in a tradition started, following along from Donald Trump, was trying to get, Julian Assange extradited to the U.S. to be tried and possibly executed for the crime of engaging in journalism. Like, this is just such...
His explicit intent to deploy our active duty military against our own citizens. Consider the power he will have, especially after the...
I'm so sick of this shit. Because it's like, when they always do this, it's like, they talk about what a powerful office the presidency is when it's like a Republican might be getting into it. But when they're in it, it's like, oh well, the president doesn't really have much power at all. Like they let that thing on the Texas border come to a head with the National Guard there, even though the president actually has the authority to federalize the National Guard in situations like that. Right under the U.S. Constitution, could have just federalized them, given them an order to stand down, and then prosecuted anyone who disobeyed it. Didn't do that. Like, they always do this thing where the president is all-powerful unless it's a Democrat.
The United States Supreme Court just ruled that he would be immune from criminal prosecution.
Yeah, but they weren't, that wasn't anything new. Like, the charges against Trump were already based on the premise that they only charged him for things that could be said to have been non-official acts, even though his worst crimes were all official acts. Like, he committed the crime of aggression, he committed crimes against humanity, numerous cases of murder and kidnapping and torture and stuff like that, stuff that carries a much longer sentence than the shit he's being charged with. But, he's not being charged with that stuff because the Democrats don't want to set a fucking precedent where they wouldn't be allowed to do that stuff themselves, because they're doing it right now. So, I mean, it is just so rich for them to be appalled by a decision that has been actually completely in line with the way that some presidential impunity has worked in the U.S.
Just imagine Donald Trump with no guardrails.
We don't need to imagine, we have that already.
He would use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States, not to improve your life, not to strengthen our national security.
Which is not the same thing at all. Like our national security. They love to throw that shit in there. Like, we should get, like the national security is our security, as opposed to usually being a weapon directed against us.
But to serve the only client he has ever had, himself.
It's so...
I mean, just no pushback from them. They're so useless. Because this game that they play where the president is all-powerful until the president's one of theirs, is just get so fucking predictable. It's so insulting. Like, so like he's all, it's such a powerful office, but like Biden's been in the presidency for a very long time, and he's never done a goddamn thing to like protect trans people from these murderous laws that are criminalizing trans people's existence in most of the U.S. continental landmass. Hasn't done shit to, really seriously protect abortion rights. Because all of that, this idea that the president is, the president has all sorts of power, but it's somehow never ever to do anything good.
True, though.
And we know what a second Trump term would look like. It's all laid out in Project 2025, written by his closest advisors, and its sum total is to pull our country back to the past. But America, we are not going back. We are not going back.
Except, they keep talking about, this is one of the things that is really impressive, is what they're doing with the Project 2025 shit. First of all, they're leaving out the bit where actually a lot of Project 2025 is bipartisan. Like, there's a section in Project 2025 about, like, censoring LGBT online content, and it just so happens there's a bill in Congress passed the Senate not too long ago called the Kids Online Safety Act, which is an LGBT content censorship bill. It gives state governors the power to censor any content they deem harmful to youth, and it creates all sorts of onerous cost barriers that would essentially mean that, like, queer people would be banned from the internet in the United States for all intents and purposes. So, yeah, I mean, see, by making it all about Project 2025, they, on the one hand, are, they make it look like they're against things, but without ever having to outright say they're against them, without ever making any commitment not to do them.
Right.
We are not going back.
Exactly.
I like the speech.
She started out with security. That was a good way to go.
When Donald Trump tried to cut
no
Social
substantive
Security and
analysis from the
Medicare, we are not going back to when he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, when insurance companies could deny people with pre-existing conditions. We are not.
Yeah, except they still can. They just can't call it a pre-existing condition. The Affordable Care Act, it's funny, they were just talking about the Heritage. She didn't use the name the Heritage Foundation, but Project 2025 is the Heritage Foundation. Guess what else is the Heritage Foundation? The Affordable fucking Care Act. The Heritage Foundation first came up with the idea. It was first enacted in Massachusetts by Mitt Romney. I mean, that is just a perfect example of how you really cannot trust the Democrats to oppose something from the Heritage Foundation.
Going to let him eliminate the Department of Education that funds our public schools.
He would literally that would require,
not going to let him.
Let's just remember, that would require an act of Congress. So it would require Democrats to go along with it. And the thing is, I mean, that stuff sounds really good in a policy paper. It's red meat for all your reactionary assholes. But the thing is, you can actually do more deregulation, give, companies, capitalists more power over our lives by keeping these institutions, the Department of Education or the EPA or whatever, nominally in existence, while at the same time ensuring that they have no capability to do their ostensible duty. Because then, as long as there is a CDC or an EPA or something like that, even if they don't do shit, I know that's hard to imagine, people will think, as long as there is one, that it will be doing the things that you would expect that, a body like that to do. If, on the other hand, you just outright get rid of it, all of a sudden, people do not expect people will not be under the illusion that that stuff is being taken care of. they will be aware that that it is not being taken care of, and that will tend to inspire a lot of people to start taking things into their own hands, as we saw actually, I mean, during what is really the heyday of pandemic-related precautions, which is 2020. You know, you had this motherfucker up there, talking about COVID, talking about the pandemic, who also said that maybe it's a good idea to inject bleach, because that would be good for your health and stuff like that. And so a lot of people say, okay, there's nobody at the fucking wheel on this thing, we got to do it ourselves. And so, people were making their own masks because nobody was doing anything to make masks available cheaply or freely, which they should have been, and they should be now. So it's actually much easier if you keep them there in name only. I mean, it's the same thing with the Department of Labor. Department of Labor is basically fucking powerless at this point. They have no enforcement budget. For, to give you an example of how little inspection they do, in New York City, with all their millions of workers, there are 2 DOL inspectors for the entire 5 boroughs. It's fucking, but it's there, so people think, oh, they must be doing something, and so people will tend to assume that they can kind of chill because it's, somebody's got at this. So I don't actually think that's likely, even assuming that they could actually get the votes in Congress.
And programs like Head Start that provide preschool and child care for our children. America, we are not going back.
Literally, okay, so this is all about what she's not
be a model for how we hold her accountable later. Talk about it in the summer.
Way forward to a future with a strong and growing middle class, because we know a strong middle class has always...
Yeah, and this is such a bullshit term. I mean, you look at middle class when politicians talk about it. Like, if you look at a middle class tax cut, doesn't matter if you're talking about Democrats or Republicans, they both do the exact same thing on this. You look at who the middle class is. The middle class starts out with, the top 1% by income of the population. It is such a fucking meaningless term.
Has been critical to America's success, and building that middle class will be a defining goal of my presidency.
People haven't talked about the middle class in so long. It's refreshing to hear.
This is personal for me.
Yeah.
The middle class is where I come from.
No,
my mother kept
nobody
a strict
comes from
budget.
it doesn't exist. It's a nonsense concept.
We lived within our means, yet we wanted for little.
And wow, that must have been really nice back in those days, where you could live within your means and want for little and live in the fucking East Bay. That's not how that is now. I mean, the prices in the 70s with the way you could afford the prices in of the 70s with the wages of today.
They expected us to make the most of the opportunities that were available to us, and to be grateful for them. Because, as she taught us, opportunity is not available to everyone. Is
that a good thing, though? Is that how that ought to be? That actually sounds like maybe something sucks. If, opportunities to do basic things like fucking get an education, have a profession or something like that aren't available to everyone.
Why we will create what I call an opportunity economy, opportunity economy where everyone...
This is such a bullshit term. Actually, you want to talk about losing ground, Adam. That is such a great quote, and it's so true. But if you go back to Newt Gingrich days, they loved to use the word opportunity like this. This is very much a Newt Gingrich power move she's doing here. They like to talk about an opportunity society. And the idea of the opportunity society is that since the welfare state would be decimated and the wages would stagnate, as indeed they have, then people would have an opportunity to just sort of sell themselves for next to nothing, and that would be a wonderful thing if you were the one buying. Like, an opportunity economy. What the fuck does that even mean? That is just a totally meaningless fucking...
Has the chance...
Yeah, let me see, is there going to be any fucking pushback on any of this?
...to compete and a chance to succeed.
A chance to compete and a chance to... This is literally... This would be this in the 1990s would have been a Newt Gingrich speech. Like, literally, the word for word, you can go back and look at what, like, fucking Gingrich and Trent Lott and all those disgusting pricks were saying back in the 90s on their contract on America and all that bullshit. And it was exactly this kind of language. Someplace in my library, got a book that somebody bought me for my birthday. It was, they must have thought it was satirical, but it wasn't. Because they would never have gotten it for me if it was, you know, if they had not thought it was satirical. Because it was like the quotations from Speaker Newt. It was Newt Gingrich's Little Red Book. And it was all about, you know, basically his particular approach to bullshit. And it was all about things like using bullshit phrases like an opportunity economy and saying we have the opportunity to compete and the opportunity to succeed. And why should we have to compete for like basic shit though? Why should that be?
You know, she's hitting every right now.
Oh wow, it's so nice. It's so good that we have these wonderful, like you know, leftist media people like the Young Turfs to really kind of provide a critical analysis to their audience of this just heaping pile of bullshit.
Yeah.
Area, small town, or big city. And as president, I will bring together labor and workers and small business owners and...
She'll bring together labor and workers. Wow, I think they're already together.
Entrepreneurs.
Oh, class collaboration. So, okay, we're gonna have exploitation.
American companies to create jobs, to grow our economy, and to lower the cost of everyday needs like health care and housing and growth.
Yeah, notice, I mean, you want to talk about going back. Go back to 2020, and she was at least pretending to be for having an actual public health system in the U.S. because at the time they felt that they would be outside the Overton window to reject that. Like if you go back to her platform when she was running for president then during the primary, and she claimed to be for Medicare for all, which is almost single payer. And now she's just saying, well, we should make health insurance more affordable. Like, what the fuck does that mean?
We will provide access to capital for small business owners and entrepreneurs and founders. And we will end America's housing shortage.
There is no housing shortage.
And
build those houses.
Social Security.
There literally is no housing shortage. There is a housing glut. The problem is not that we don't have enough houses. If you were only allowed to own one house, all of those empty, there are more than enough empty dwelling units to provide decent housing to every person who currently hasn't got it. There is no fucking housing shortage. Building is not going to change the fact you can build as many houses as you want. If people can't afford them, they're going to be empty, and that's exactly what's already going down. This is just a fucking developer's wet dream. No wonder anti-transphobia is so excited.
And Medicare. Now compare that to Donald Trump, because I think everyone here knows he doesn't actually fight for the middle class. He doesn't actually fight.
I mean, if we use the definition politicians use, then you really can't deny that he fights for the middle class, because the middle class includes the richest people in the country. And he certainly fights for the richest people in the country.
For the middle class. Instead, he fights for himself and his billionaire friends. And
so
he will
that's
give
like
them
something you have in common. She's trying to bring people together now.
another round of tax breaks that will add up to $5 trillion to the national debt.
Who gives a fuck about the national debt? Like, literally the only people who should give a shit about the national debt are bond traders. Everybody else, it's just bullshit. And the thing is, under existing law, like, let's just remember the national debt is a fucking choice. It is literally possible. Under existing U.S. law, the Mint Act allows coins to be minted in literally any denomination. And unlike printing money, that is not considered to add to the debt. That money is just new money that simply enters existence magically. You could pay off the entire national debt. You could just fucking mint a coin that is worth the value of the national debt and buy back all those fucking bonds with it, and the national debt would be zero and you wouldn't have to cut anything. The thing is, the reason I like to talk about the national debt is it gives them an excuse to cut shit that they don't like and we need to survive.
All the while, he intends to enact what in effect is a national sales tax, call it a Trump tax, that would raise prices on middle-class families by almost $4,000 a year. Well, instead of a Trump
let's again remember that's something that he would actually need Democrats to vote along with him in Congress to do.
Hike, we will pass a middle-class tax cut that will
here we go, yeah. And when you look at that proposal, look at the definition of middle class. Because it will... Okay, the top 10% starts out about $200K a year in the U.S., roughly. And usually these middle-class tax cuts actually primarily are dealing specifically go into the top 10% or even the top 1%. And the thing about tax cuts is that for most people, for most of us, we do not pay enough money in income tax for them to mean anything, because we don't make enough money. A tax cut on most people with normal incomes, does not actually give them any disposable income that they can notice. When you actually do the sums and find out exactly how much people would be saving a year with these tax cuts, it's always less than what they would have been getting, in terms of essential fucking survival programs and stuff like that are cut in order to make this possible. Oh, I want to, yes, I'm totally into the opportunity to compete with other poors for slightly less unaffordable necessities. And I really can't wait to get the, 25 cents a year in tax cut. See, the great thing about being freelance in this country, because the translation profession is totally casualized, is that you can have zero taxable income and still owe
more than 100 million Americans. Friends, I believe America cannot truly be prosperous unless Americans are fully able to make their own decisions about their own lives, especially on matters of heart and home.
Yes.
Yes to what? She hasn't really actually said anything yet.
Tonight, in America, too many women are not able to make those decisions.
Yeah, and you could have done something about it back when you controlled both houses and the White House, but you decided not to, because it's actually, the Democrats have decided it's better for them to campaign on, first on the fear of losing it, and then on the, the hope of maybe getting it back, than it is to actually sort it out. Because if they had, for example, just to give one of the many times when this could have been passed into law, when Obama, they were talking about 2008, the 2008 atmosphere. Part of that was Obama had 2 bills all passed by both houses waiting for his signature. One was called the Employee Free Choice Act, which would have legalized a lot of union organization or union organizing, solved a lot of problems for workers who were trying to organize by allowing them to decide what modality they were going to use for like elections rather than letting bosses decide that for them. And the other was the Freedom of Choice Act, which would have codified Roe. The only thing those things needed, those 2 bills needed in order to become law, was the signature of Barack Obama. And he said he would do that on day 1. Day 1 comes along, and, you know, first big press conference, people ask him, you know, so what about the EFCA? What about Freedom of Choice Act? He said, that's not a legislative priority. And that was like the last time it was ever spoken of. Like, literally, they want to dangle this shit. And that's the thing. Like, people feel compelled to, like, donate to Democrats if they want to, like, protect abortion rights or something like that. When there are abortion funds right now making sure people have access to it, including in the states where that is being made, you know, largely impossible. And they need money. That money will definitely go to making sure people who need abortions can get them. There are funds for like trans healthcare that will allow, will if they are properly financed, allow people who need transition-related healthcare to access it. And that is so much better way of spending that money, if you're going to donate it anyway, than giving it to politicians who will talk about it, dangle it out in front of you, and then, since they don't actually care all that much about it, like, I mean, Harris has a horrible record on trans rights, you probably will end up funding, you know, another fucking genocide or something like that before you'll actually end up getting the things that you're spending the money in hopes of getting.
And let's be clear about how we got here. Donald Trump handpicked members of the United States Supreme Court to take away reproductive freedom. And now he bragged...
Yeah, but, yes, true. And then the Democrats refused to enact a bill that would have... I forget what the name of this version of it was, this iteration, but they refused to enact it. They also categorically refused to expand the court, though they would have been in a position to do that. So where we are right now is a bipartisan thing, actually. We would not be there right now if the Democrats were actually committed to this, to, like, reproductive freedom.
About it. In his words, quote, "I did it and I'm proud to have done it," end quote. Boo! Well, I'll tell you, over the past 2 years, I've traveled across our country, and women have told me their stories. Husbands and fathers have shared theirs.
You know, it's really too bad she wasn't in a position to do anything about that. Wait, I mean, like, what party's in the White House again? Oh, so they were telling her their stories and she didn't do shit.
Of women miscarrying in a parking lot, developing sepsis, losing the ability to ever again have children, all because doctors are afraid they may go to jail for caring for their patients.
Yeah. And it would really have been... That's why it would have been nice if there had been a Democrat in the White House and maybe, you know, in Congress and something to change the law so they wouldn't have to worry about that shit. Yeah, I don't know, just thinking.
Couples just trying to grow their family, cut off in the middle of IVF treatments. Children who have survived sexual assault, potentially being forced to carry...
Not all of them having survived it by Joe Biden.
...carry a pregnancy to term. This is what's happening in our...
On your fucking watch, though. It's happening on your watch. You're in the white. You're the fucking vice president. You don't get to talk about how bad things are right now, as if you had nothing to do with that.
Our country, because of Donald Trump. And understand, he is not done.
He would be done if he would definitely be done if Democrats had actually done even just those two things. Like, protect trans rights, protect fucking, provide federal statutory protection for abortion rights. He would have been done. Like, if they had done those things, but the problem is they don't like that. Because if they do something, it raises expectations. Then people want them to do other things. They solve one problem, people are going to want them to solve another one. Better to let this one just fester and campaign on it.
As a part of his agenda, he and his allies would limit access to birth control, ban medication abortion, and enact a nationwide abortion ban with
all of which, it's worth noting, they would need the control of Congress to do, or the votes of Democrats. And the thing is, the Democrats have been quite open, they're quite officially opposed to the idea of only supporting candidates who support things like trans rights and reproductive rights and just the improving the declining living standards of the working class or something like that. They refuse to make those things a litmus test. So when you're spending money supporting Democrats, at least some of them are actively working against these things.
Without Congress. And get this.
Well, the VP the VP doesn't make policy, but the VP does cast the tie. It is the president pro tem in the Senate, and they also have a pretty strong position in terms of the bully pulpit. If a VP were to just call a press conference and say, this administration's duplicity is shameful. They claim to care about trans rights. They claim to care about ending the genocide, but actually they're quite enthusiastically carrying out. And I'm done lying about it. That would actually put the White House in a position. They would put them on the defensive, and that would force them to actually change their tune. It's not a powerless position. In fact, remember early on, the excuse for not doing worthwhile things for a while was the Senate parliamentarian wouldn't allow it. An unelected role that has no real power at all, and that they just trotted out and said the Senate parliamentarian, almost said the Senate proletarian, which I guess would be the janitor of the Senate, probably, wouldn't allow it. And then it was pointed out that actually Cop Mala was the one who gets to decide whether to retain or fire the Senate parliamentarian. That she serves at the part of the position of the VP, part of her role in the Senate is to fire and hire Senate parliamentarians. And she announced, no, she's not going to fire the Senate parliamentarian, even though the Senate parliamentarian is supposedly blocking a major, policy initiative that they supposedly care about.
Get this. He plans to create a national anti-abortion coordinator and force states to report on women's miscarriages and abortions.
Yeah, and again, if the Democrats don't go along with that, it won't happen. And that's both at the state and federal level.
Simply put, they are out of their minds.
Yeah, this is not the same thing, though, as saying that you will do anything to stop this. It doesn't even mean that people are like applauding. She has not even said she opposes any of this.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, we're going to look that up and verify it for you guys. But if
wow,
they're really asking
welcome
people
back. Jenk's woken up. He's going to actually do some fucking commentary. He's going to do some critical analysis to verify whether that's true. Thank you. 25 minutes into the speech, he's finally actually demonstrating that there's a reason for him to be here.
report their miscarriages throughout.
Have you noticed we're nearly all the way through this thing. They've hardly spoken. They've hardly said a damn thing. They're just sort of sitting there nodding along. Like fucking useless. Yeah, they were doing this live, I think. So that does make it a bit hard, but they're not actually, there are moments in here designed specifically so that commentators can commentate, and they've been using it mostly for just fanboying.
The country to a national database, that alone will lose the election for them.
That they don't trust women? Well, we trust women. We trust women.
Really? So, what does that mean, though? See, again, you say this, and it sounds like something, but it commits to nothing. It commits to absolutely nothing. These speeches are written by lawyers.
And when Congress passes a bill to restore reproductive freedom, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law.
You mean like Obama was going to? Let's leave aside the fact that the Democrats themselves torpedoed the last attempt. Obama also said he'd do that on day one, and then he said, no, that would be divisive because it's only something most people want, and...
That would be great if we had a female president who signed the law, a national law to guarantee abortion or reproductive rights. That would be amazing.
Yeah, but has this happened before, Jenk? Perhaps? Is there perhaps a history of Democrats saying they're going to do this and then not doing it? That you might want to make your audience who are here apparently for your trenchant analysis aware of?
Many other fundamental freedoms are at stake. The freedom to live safe from gun violence in our schools, communities, and places of worship. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride.
Something else they could have done, something like every single time. That LGBT rights has come up in Congress, the Democrats themselves won't even unanimously support it. And at the state level, a lot of these there are Democrats voting for these anti-LGBT, criminalization bills.
The freedom to breathe clean air and drink clean water and live free from the pollution
people in Flint
that fuels the climate crisis, and the freedom that unlocks all the others, the freedom to vote.
That is, not the freedom that unlocks all the others, though. That is actually proves to be the most irrelevant of all. Because, and the best proof of that is simply the fact that the right to vote was, the people, the right to vote has never been won through elections. It simply hasn't. Because the people fighting for the right to vote literally couldn't vote. That's why they were fighting for it. It was won sometimes through political maneuvering. It was interesting, in the Kollontai book that I translated, there's a whole section of, she's talking about these early suffrage victories. She's writing in 1909. And she points out in a couple of cases what happened was that right-wing governments at, the state level in Australia were worried about the fact that a whole lot of Labor Party supporters were moving in, and they figured if they gave women the vote, that would counteract that, because they assumed women would be more conservative for no good reason. They just sort of assumed it. And, you know, but a lot of the time, like, when you look at the struggle for the right to vote, first of all, it's never just about the right to vote. It's about, you know, doing something with it. It's about specific goals that the right to vote is supposedly going to be helpful in. But the thing is, the right to vote has never been won by voting, and that alone is proof that actually it is not the main one.
With this election, we finally have the opportunity to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act.
These are rare mention of voting rights. They kind of ignored it. Largely
during the election cycle.
And let me be clear.
So let's see.
After decades in law enforcement,
That's a sore spot,
I know
honestly.
the importance of safety and security, especially at our border.
Oh,
Last
fuck off.
year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades.
Yeah, yes, it's a neo-Nazi wet dream, and it will make the border even more deadly. It was an absolutely horrifying thing. I mean, we have to remember, the last time anything progressive happened in the world of immigration in the U.S., it was Reagan's initiative. The amnesty, the Immigration Reform and Control Act, with the amnesty for people who'd been in the country since 1982 or before, that was Reagan. The Democrats on immigration for the past 40 fucking years have been just one horrible reactionary white supremacist wet dream of bill after another. IRERA, the EDPA, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, which also had some anti-immigrant shit in there. Like, there's been nothing. It has been getting worse. Like, literally, the Democrats are to the right of fucking Reagan on this. And here she is talking about that. Like, I mean, she keeps on talking about her mother and shit, but and her father. And under the laws that the Democrats have passed, neither of them would have been allowed into the fucking country.
The Border Patrol endorsed it.
That's the sign that it's bad. Like, look up border zone mass graves and you'll see why the Border Patrol, their endorsement is proof that it is bad. They just they literally get away with murder down in the border zone. Nobody's paying it. There's no oversight. And huge numbers of people are dying as a result of it. If the Border Patrol endorse it, then what that is like white supremacists and drug cartels like it. That's what the Border Patrol. That's what the Border Patrol represents: white supremacism and blow, basically. But I've noticed the time. It is time to wrap it up for tonight. Thank you to everyone who joined in. I hope you enjoyed the stream. I will be back at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time to resume the Last JabroniCon, and I do hope you will join me then. Have a good night, and fuck this shit that we just watched. Jesus, what a fucking country. And yeah, current immigration policy would make Reagan